Across the Atlantic. A magazine for North Americans from Germany.
Hello, welcome once again to the magazine program from Cologne that is filled with news and views about West Germany. My name is Stephen Smith, and I won't be leading you down the garden path by suggesting that the show today has a lot to do with all sorts of power. For example, you'll hear about people power, local citizens against atomic energy plants in their neighborhoods. There's a story about plant power, or how byproducts from power plants are being used to grow food. You'll get insights on theater power in the streets, and picture power, photos as art. Why, even Larry Wayne will talk with you energetically. All that and some music, too, so please stay with us for the next half hour. It often seems that the common interests of people in different lands are dealt with diplomatically at the national government level. Then along comes an issue which indicates that grassroots concerns are much the same throughout the world. One such issue these days is atomic energy. Many towns in the Western democracies are holding debates, referenda, and demonstrations against the locating of a nuclear power plant in their neighborhood. Few people will seriously dispute that nuclear power plants are here to stay. And yet in 1976, protests and demonstrations against them in West Germany have been gaining momentum. Citizens' initiatives are mushrooming because of the growing fear that nuclear power plants, when all is told, might do more harm than good. Are such fears justified? Or is there a lack of specific information? And what can citizens' initiatives hope to achieve on such an issue? Alfred Schroeder reports from Bonn.
There is general acceptance that citizen protests and demonstrations are one of the legitimate and democratic means people have to bring their very own problems, their demands, their desires to the attention of the public and also of the authorities concerned. No one doubts that. No one denies them the right to demonstrate. It is one of the constitutionally guaranteed rights of every German. The problem is that some of these demonstrations get out of hand and thereby come close to breaking laws and rules. But that's a small minority, yet they do make the headlines, not only here in this country. And if the state, protecting its rights, is sending police against these demonstrators, as in the case of Brockdorf, for instance, then there can easily be clashes and violence. Needless to say that demonstrations can be pro and con almost everything. More schools and less street noise, more kindergarten and less smog, more and better education and less attempts on man's environment. The list could fill pages. The so-called citizens' initiatives have achieved immense improvements and often set the badly lubricated bureaucratic machinery into motion. They have woken up hundreds of thousands of people to realities, have made millions realize where things are wrong and what the state ought to do to rectify them. In most cases where protests were well-founded and well-organized, people supporting them have achieved what they wanted and then dissolved their organization. It had reached its goal. The present wave of citizens' initiatives throughout the country aiming against nuclear power plants presents a lot of headaches. On the one hand, West Germany needs energy which is independent from the crisis-prone fossil fuels, oil which must be imported, and coal which is expensive and is getting scarce. Nuclear energy makes the country less dependent on the often critical oil supplies. It is a must. It is a source of energy which no one wants but everybody needs. On the other hand, there are still too many question marks. Firstly, the plants must be built close to water because they have an immense need of it for cooling purposes. The power plants with the high-rising cooling towers are indeed a sore sight and can damage the looks of nature. But that's not all. The byproducts can be dangerous to nature, to man's environment, to the ecology. There is the fear of radiation, of accidents which would set free harmful rays, and the not sufficiently answered problem of what to do with nuclear waste. All of this and much more concerns not only the people living in the immediate environment of a nuclear power station. It arouses concerned comments and eventually activities from people who are not that immediately affected. The protesters against nuclear power plants argue they raise their voice in the interest of all. They claim they speak in the name of all Germans. And that again sparks political groupings to take action, often for very selfish reasons. Other groups whose interests are also at stake protest against the protests, like in the case of several thousand workers of a Mülheim industrial company which builds nuclear reactors, who staged a demonstration warning that their workplaces were endangered if nuclear power plants were not built. No one knows yet where the Brocktorf protest demonstrations will lead to, or the ones at Wheel in the Black Forest or elsewhere. But one thing is certain already. Public attention has been aroused to the problems. The authorities know they are being watched closely and they can't do what they please. Politicians here in Bonn are aware now of all these problems, and there are assurances that no power plant would be built against the interest of the population. But there is also the realization that it is necessary to inform the population much better than before on what nuclear power means to a highly industrialized country such as this, the vital necessity of them for all the people. But also fair and reliable information should be given on the dangers and their extent and the problems of nuclear waste. A better coordination is promised between the citizen initiatives and the regional planners, between industry and the population, and much more. So, in the end, one can easily say that in this case, but in thousands of more instances throughout the country, these by and large democratic groups have their success. Now, compromises are needed, carefully weighing all pro and all con, and then hopefully coming up with a decision which is in the interest of all.
Have you ever heard the word agrotherm before? It implies the symbiosis or helpful interdependence of agriculture and electric generating stations. Sound like a strange combination? Well, not really. Germans may be associating this new term with the growing of peanuts and soybeans in the near future. Agrotherm is a project financed by the Federal Ministry for Science and Research. The basic idea was to find a way to put the hot water waste from power plants to good use. Kathleen Lawton tells you about the project.
When was the last time you saw a soybean growing symbiotically with a power plant? Or the last time you even thought of a soybean in connection with anything less humble than a gram of protein? Well, if you'd spent any time traveling around West Germany recently, you might have discovered that not only are soybeans growing in the backyards of these industrial monsters, but peanuts, sugar beets, and strawberries are all thriving, virtually in their laps. The secret of all this happy symbiosis is a project known as Agrotherm, financed by the West German Ministry for Science and Research. Initiated last year, it now covers 4 separate installations in various parts of the country, and as a recent press conference revealed, the results to date look highly promising. The main objective was to find some way of successfully using the hot water waste from power plants without having to build expensive cooling towers, or without simply dumping the boiling liquid into neighboring rivers. The water is pumped into pipes buried 30 inches below ground. These pipes lie at distances of 3 feet from each other, cover a total area of 17 acres, and warm the ground to a comfortable 45 degrees above its normal level. In Neurath, near Cologne, for example, the project has been underway for 4 months, and already a tasty crop of fruits and vegetables are growing in this subtropical climate. And scientists, while delighted that all of nature's bounty is actually increasing and multiplying, are even more pleased that crop production increases range from 35% with corn to 60% with sugar beets, all the way up to 70% with new potatoes. Agriculturally, the experiment shows all signs of being a success. It also looks as if power plants will no longer have to worry about building expensive water cooling towers, as the agrotherm plants are considerably less costly than any known alternative. However, the scientists, with an admirable scientific reserve, admit that some questions haven't yet been answered, and as the government has set aside 11.6 million marks to be spent on the project up until 1978, there will presumably be time to sort out the facts and glean the necessary information. No one is venturing to make any predictions. If the main difficulties are ironed out and farmers accept the new system, then conceivably more than 1% of agricultural land in the Federal Republic will be filled with prospering agrotherm plants. In the meantime, West Germany's 4 existent plants are already filled, with European scientists wondering if this system might be feasible for their countries too.
Chances are you've experienced street theater in the town where you live. Street musicians and artists of all kinds are as much part of the local scene in West Germany as in many other countries. One of the ideas behind all this is to reach wider and different audiences. The Great Salt Lake Mime Troupe is a group of actors and musicians from the U.S., based in Holland, now touring Germany. They are attempting to take the theater out into the streets. 2 of its members, Katie Duck and Matthew Child, told Paul Bendelow how they work.
Well, we're working in about 4 different media. working in mime, in dance, in clowning, and in music. And it's pretty much free form. Like the company, there's 3 performers in it, and we've been working together now, Matthew and I, for about 3 years, and Giorgio for 2 years, and the musicians as well, some of them for up to 3 years, and some of them are just recently joining us. But the point is that we've been working together long enough that now our show has become a lot of improvisation. We have set up themes, different clown characters, sometimes even not even a specific theme or character, and we improvise on it. And then we have like set movement pieces that we do with the band that work into improvisation. But it's kind of like Commedia players, like 1976 Commedia.
What sort of response are you trying to get from the audience, Matthew?
Just to enjoy it. That's about it. I'm afraid there's nothing else they can do. To get them off some way, like we get off ourselves on stage, because that's why we do it, because we like doing it. It's fun. We like to play with each other on stage, the band, and we hope the audience gets into the same idea. It's not we don't want to create a typical, that's what I call it, a typical sort of stiff theater attitude when you come to see a show. It'd be nicer to just play around, just have a good time, that's all. We're not trying to show anything particular, no particular message.
That's the point, too. That's one of the points of the company, is to be able to reach a general audience, not just one type of audience, and to be able to play a large hall like this one. It's a pretty conservative hall, and to do a nice show there, and yet be able to take the whole thing out on the street, take the whole thing to a bar, and still have a sense of fun, a sense of play. It's real reflective, because we're like communal theater.
Do you have any experience of German audiences?
Yes, we've played Germany all this summer.
But it's been different kind of things every time. Some children's shows, in a working community in Essen, for instance, where the audience really had never seen any theater like this, and all the audience seemed to be good, but different places.
They laugh a lot, though, in Germany. Yeah. They seem to laugh a lot. They think things are really funny, and it's real hearty laughter. They do. They seem to laugh.
Photography is a legitimate art form in the eyes of a growing number of gallery owners and art museum directors in both Western Europe and in the United States. Leading museums in New York, Stockholm, and Paris, for example, exhibit permanent photographic collections. The Rheinisches Landesmuseum in the West German capital of Bonn has just followed suit and opened this country's first museum-sponsored exhibition devoted to photography. Willy Maus reports.
Up to now, museums in West Germany have virtually ignored photography as an artistic medium, regarding it, in conventional terms, as at best a commercial art form. On the other hand, a few museum directors, especially in the United States, have gone to the other extreme in their discernment, regarding photographers as artists using optics, chemicals, and imagination in the same way as painters blend imagination, vision, and oils on canvas. Klaus Honneff, the director of exhibitions at Bonn's Rheinisches Landesmuseum, argues that photography is a cultural phenomenon of the 20th century which cannot be ignored. That judgment, coupled with the notion that the museum is not just an art museum but a museum for cultural history, has led to a broad range of photo collection and presentation. The museum's acquisitions will not be confined to art photography. It will also search for works in the documentary field and in photojournalism, which they also call art. There is a small group of turn-of-the-century news photos, for example, depicting German farmers and workers waiting for the ships that will take them to America. The faces of those people reflect the hope for a new opportunity mixed with fear and despair over having to leave the old life. However, the gallery's development of the medium's critical history will not rely on single photographs or random groups of stills, but rather on entire series and collections of works by individual photographers. Klaus Honneff is convinced that many valuable negatives are still resting in some forgotten corner of an attic or are in danger of being thrown away. At the same time, the museum does not intend to make many expensive purchases of collections. According to Herr Honneff, who has undertaken initial responsibility for the project, his museum has to rely on gifts and endowments to widen the collections. Finding space for the photography department posed a number of problems for the museum. A negative archive has been established, but the supporting technical facilities will not be available until the completion of a new library building in 1977. The materials collected to date are so extensive that there will be not enough room until next year for the Landesmuseum to create a permanent presentation of the total of its collection. Until the new rooms are added, the works of individual photographers will be featured during a fixed period of time.
Now it's almost Larry Wayne time. Larry is an unofficial ambassador of goodwill. He leaves cheer and a smile wherever he goes. This week you can grin as he tells you about commuter tickets for pets, the great sauerkraut shortage, and some lambs who strayed. Right now he's waiting for me to say, "Okay, Larry Wayne, for 5 minutes, it's all yours." But today, Larry, are you joshing us? What the devil is a Wolpertinger?
Ah, the Wolpertinger has received its due. The Bavarian Poachers Academy has been founded, and with that, in the middle of the hunting season, Bavaria's legendary beast has attained increased recognition and, most important, special protection. The poacher's code is as follows. Let's keep the Wolpertinger safe so that he can sneak behind the backs of those stray Prussians in our fair state. Bavarians enjoy an eternal feud with the Prussians. Then there's the WWA, or World Wolpertinger Association, with alleged headquarters in Cleveland, Ohio. Also, many clubs with chairmen, representatives, secretaries, and even sports managers engaged in honor of the critter that resembles a marten. And serious scientists who teach physics and history at universities are keeping notes on the Wolpertinger. Gradually, as Prussian belief in the Wolpertinger diminishes, the Bavarian credence increases proportionately. Yes, Virginia, there is a Wolpertinger. While the Poachers Academy tries to trace the origin of the thing to the Tertiary with the help of paleontological clues and fossil findings, the World Wolpertinger Association thinks it goes back to another age. a time when the Prussians swapped their black sooty heaven for the Bavarian white and blue and passed the Weisswurst equator. Well, that's one opinion. Yet everyone agrees there must be about 1,500 Wolpertingers in existence throughout the world, and some 12 or 13 in Bavaria. What does it look like? Well, one poacher claims he saw a fine specimen standing 2 feet high with long sienna brown hair, sporting 16-inch horns, and looking very surprised. Well, you'd look surprised too if you saw the poacher. Anyway, here's to the Wolperting, every bit as rare as Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky. And it doesn't even gyre and gimble with the slivy toves. Well, so much for natural science. Here's a new dimension in communication for Germany's blind, some 70,000 sightless citizens. Beginning next year, newspapers in sound will be distributed locally throughout the country. Press center will be Holzmind in Germany, where the tape-recorded newspapers will go into production, 8,000 a day. Now, this has gone just about far enough. This catering to dogs in Germany, I mean. Mutts are seen everywhere, in restaurants, in bars, in barber shops, and on streetcars. And now they're even encouraging pooches as passengers on public transportation. Would you believe a cut-rate monthly ticket for dogs on Munich streetcars? Just like the master, the pets can ride as much as they want for a flat $41 a month, the adult fee. Munich, the city with a heart, is even more a city with hounds. I tell you, everything's going to the dogs. Now, how about a sign for our times, okay? From the Westdeutschen Allgemeine, whoever attended yesterday's concert may have noticed that the toilets weren't functioning. Personnel was busy around the clock trying to take the complicated technique in hand, unquote. Now, this is no laughing matter, friends. West Germany's sauerkraut lovers may be in for a shortage of that delectable grub. Reason? The cabbage is going to East Germany, that's why. Already in September, 300 tons were freighted away, and in November, another 2,500 tons went that away from the farms in Schleswig-Holstein. East Germans are paying top money for the cabbage, and, well, you know, business is business. Meanwhile, the West German sauerkraut industry has put in a protest in Bonn, warning of a dangerous scarcity if this goes on. Certainly, West Germans will have to dig deep to pay for available cabbage. Hardest hit will most likely be those folks south of the Main River, where the traditional Weisswurst and ribs just naturally call for sauerkraut. Ironically, food canners here are looking eastward for new supplies of cabbage, to Yugoslavia and Poland. But if East Germany is paying 8 marks more than the West German market price for this stuff, why wouldn't East Bloc countries prefer selling to them too? Well, that might just happen. Anyway, as they say in Pennsylvania Dutch, das Cabbage got damaged. And finally, the little lambs that couldn't resist a gamble through paradise. 200 sheep in Rosenheim, Bavaria, followed their lead ram out of the accustomed farmyard and into the garden behind a house of ill repute. A law officer finally got a bright idea, took the bell from the lead sheep's back, and led the way himself back to the old farmyard. The shepherd was lying fast asleep in a wheelbarrow. And now, I'll have to take it on the lamb. So until next time, so long, everyone.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end for this time. Just time for me, Stephen Smith, to say for all of us, thanks for listening. Join us again. Keep 'em smiling. This program was produced by the Transcription Service of Radio Deutsche Welle in Cologne.